Imagine getting a transmission from the year 3050, and it's not the blueprints for a time machine.
Right.
It's not like schematics for an interstellar warp drive or whatever. It's an autopsy report of the 21st century.
Wow. Yeah, they set the tone.
It really does. And it says our biggest historical catastrophe wasn't caused by rogue AI or global war or, economic collapse. It was caused by how fast we rushed to say the words, I know.
What's fascinating here is the sheer audacity of that premise. I mean, the idea that humanity's greatest existential threat wasn't a lack of raw intelligence or, technological firepower.
Right, like the big sci-fi threats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But rather, it was this subtle, almost invisible flaw in how we process reality. Like, we possess the brain power to split the atom, we mapped the human genome, but we completely lacked the cognitive discipline to question our own assumptions before acting on them.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I'm your host, and alongside our resident expert, we are looking at a stack of sources today that will honestly absolutely change how you look at the screen in your pocket.
Seriously, you are never going to scroll the same way again.
No, you're really not. So we're exploring excerpts from this brilliant conceptual manuscript. It's called Lessons Learned by Dr. Michael G. Bomar. And the framing device is it's so cool. It's written as a series of transmissions sent backward through time from this chief engineer working at the Transquantum Institute of Cognition and Reality Modeling.
Quite the title.
Right. In the year 3050. And they're sending it back to us right here, right now, in the year 2026.
And, the central thesis of these future transmissions, it's really a diagnosis of our present day. The chief engineer reveals that, looking back from their vantage point, the defining catastrophes of our era were rooted entirely in unchallenged certainty.
Unchallenged certainty, yeah.
Yeah. People built entire realities on unverified claims. They wrapped their identities around those realities, and then, they collided violently with actual physics, economics, and human nature.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to basically decode this survival manual. We're going to explore how this future civilization supposedly navigated an era of entirely synthetic reality, the total collapse of public trust, unprecedented information warfare, all the light, fun stuff.
Just a light afternoon read.
Exactly. But more importantly, we're going to extract the precise cognitive toolkit they used to survive it, so we can apply those lessons to our own lives right now. Because according to the transmission, the bottleneck is fast approaching.
It really is. The manuscript pinpoints a very specific, honestly terrifying window that we are standing right on the edge of. It's the years 2028 to 2035.
So literally right around the corner.
Right. And the chief engineer refers to this era as the Great Verification Crisis. This is the tipping point where our technological capability to manufacture media entirely severs its relationship with reality.
The text calls it the death of the eyewitness, which is such a chilling phrase that we've always had this baseline assumption that a photograph is, a captured moment of light and time.
A slice of reality.
Yeah, but the text describes a looming reality where seeing a video of an event happening is absolutely zero guarantee that the event actually occurred. You hear this flawless audio recording of a loved one or maybe a politician saying something just horrific, and your ears are fundamentally lying to you.
Because we are crossing into an environment flooded with synthetic voices and manufactured testimony. Think about it. For thousands of years, human biology relied on this simple heuristic. If my eyes and ears perceive it, the threat is real and the information is valid.
Right. See a tiger, run from the tiger.
Exactly. But suddenly, technology fundamentally shatters the very definition of what constitutes evidence. I mean, our biological hardware is completely outmatched by our digital environment.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when you first hear about deepfakes and synthetic voices and all that, the immediate reflex is to point the finger at Silicon Valley.
Oh, of course.
To say, the AI is the danger. But if I'm reading the chief engineer's diagnosis correctly, it's not the deepfakes themselves that destroy us. It's our own hardware. Our brains want to jump to a conclusion before the image is even fully loaded. It sounds like humanity was driving in a thick fog, but instead of slowing down, we just slammed on the gas because we knew the road by heart. We are the vulnerability.
That is the core revelation of the whole text. The greatest danger is the human tendency to become certain before sufficient evidence exists. And to understand why, you really have to look at the biology of uncertainty.
It's a biological thing.
Oh, absolutely. The text has these great chapters on the age of assumptions. It explains that for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, uncertainty was a deadly luxury. If there was a rustle in the bushes, making a quick, certain decision to run, even if it was just the fin, kept you alive.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. Standing around demanding empirical evidence of a tiger meant you got eaten. So evolution optimized our brains for survival, not for objective accuracy.
So wait, so admitting we don't know something actually triggers a biological threat response, isn't uncertainty naturally terrifying to the human brain?
Yes. It's exactly the opposite of how we should behave in a complex information space. Uncertainty activates the amygdala, right? The brain's fear center. It creates a literal physical sensation of anxiety.
Oh, wow.
And conversely, certainty, even if it's based on a completely false premise, provides a massive hit of dopamine. It feels incredibly soothing.
So we're basically addicts.
Pretty much. The chief engineer calls this the addiction to certainty. We crave the psychological safety of having an answer. As a result, false beliefs often feel far better and far more comforting than staring into the complex, messy fog of reality.
Man. So if the human brain naturally craves that dopamine hit of certainty just to, relieve the cognitive load of not knowing, how does our modern information ecosystem exploit that exact biological vulnerability?
Relentlessly.
Right, because if you look at the internet today, it feels like an outrage engine designed to force you to have an opinion on 10 different global crises before you've even had your morning coffee.
Yeah, the manuscript defines this as a paradox called information abundance, finite wisdom. We have infinite content at our fingertips, but our cognitive capacity hasn't changed since the Pleistocene era.
So true.
When you overload the human brain with too much data, it doesn't become smarter, it panics, and it defaults to tribal heuristics. It looks for shortcuts.
And what really struck me is the section on the architecture of deception. It details how these shortcuts are weaponized against us. The most dangerous lies in this era aren't cartoonish, fabricated falsehoods. The most effective deception is the lie of omission, like missing context.
It's actually worse than that. The lie of omission leverages your own imagination against you.
Wait, how so?
Well, say I show you a 10-second clip of an aggressive confrontation, but I purposefully edit out the 5 minutes of provocation leading up to it. I haven't technically shown you a fake video.
Right, the pixels are real.
The pixels are real. But by omitting the context, I force your brain's natural pattern recognition software to fill in the blanks with your pre-existing biases. You construct the lie yourself.
Which makes you defend it even more fiercely because it's your conclusion.
Exactly.
Which brings us to how the text views institutions. And this is interesting because the transmission sets a firm baseline rule for navigating this era. You cannot blindly outsource your trust to any single entity. Mainstream media, alternative media, governments, corporations, charismatic influencers, none of them are omniscient.
Right.
And every single one contains blind spots. Now, just to be clear for you listening, we aren't taking a side on who is better or worse here.
Absolutely not.
We're just noting the text's reality check. No human institution is exempt from incentives, which means none of them deserve unverified trust.
And that requirement for verification leads to one of the most critical conceptual breakthroughs this future civilization achieved, the third discovery. They trained their citizens to fundamentally separate a fact from a conclusion.
Yes, this part was huge.
Because in the 21st century, we use those words interchangeably. But structurally, they're entirely different things.
I love how the text breaks this down. Let me offer an analogy for this because it honestly blew my mind. Think of a fact as just a raw steel beam sitting on the ground.
Okay.
You can weigh it, you can measure it, it simply exists. The conclusion is the 50-story skyscraper we decide to build on top of that beam.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Right. We constantly build these massive, sprawling conclusions on top of a single, isolated fact. And then we defend our skyscraper as if it were the steel beam itself. And when someone points out that the building is leaning, we get furious and point at the beam and say, but the beam is real.
Yep.
Yes, the beam is real, but the architecture you built on top of it is structurally unsound.
Yeah, the manuscript provides incredibly clear examples of this to train future generations. A photograph existing is a fact. We can observe the pixels. But assuming that photograph proves someone's malicious intent, that is a conclusion. A statistic showing a rise in a certain crime rate is a fact. Assuming that statistic proves the failure of a specific policy without isolating other variables, that is a conclusion. Facts are observed. Conclusions are constructed.
And we constantly confuse the two, usually based on how angry we are at any given moment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this confusion between facts and conclusions is the very fuel for manufactured outrage. The transmission warns that emotional intensity is absolutely never an indicator of truth.
Never.
People in our era operate under the assumption that if millions of people are intensely outraged about a story on social media, well, there must be underlying truth to the narrative. Or if someone speaks with unshakable confidence on a show, they must be an expert.
But the chief engineer coldly reminds us, reality remains completely indifferent to how intensely humans feel about it. A million people passionately believing a false conclusion doesn't physically alter the universe to make it true. The universe does not negotiate with our assumptions.
It really doesn't. So the challenge becomes, once we recognize that our dopamine receptors are being hijacked, that context is routinely omitted, and that we constantly confuse our emotional conclusions with observable facts. How do we actually investigate reality? How do we stop building crooked skyscrapers?
And this is where we get to the actionable part, right? The 3050 toolkit. The future civilizations developed a specific methodology to dramatically reduce their error rate. It's outlined as the 9 discoveries, and it all starts with the investigator's mindset.
The second discovery.
Yeah, following incentives. When looking at a viral claim or a new piece of synthetic media, the first question is this true? The first question is, who benefits if I believe this?
And we have to be careful with that, though. Asking who benefits isn't some cynical magic trick to instantly declare something false.
Oh, no.
Because that's just another shortcut. It's a tool to reveal hidden mechanics. If a claim perfectly aligns with the financial, political, or even emotional incentives of the person making it.
Right. And that requirement for higher proof leads right into the 4th and 5th discoveries, which honestly, this completely flips how we currently consume information. Right now, algorithms are engineered to feed us confirmation.
Yep.
If you lean left or lean right, the machine feeds you a steady diet of evidence proving you are correct. The future civilization realized that to survive, you have to actively seek out adversarial evidence.
Which requires immense cognitive friction. You have to actively search for evidence that supports the claim, evidence that opposes it, and crucially, data from completely neutral observers with no skin in the game. You are no longer trying to win a tribal argument. Your only goal is to reduce your own potential for error.
And while you are gathering that adversarial evidence, you rely on the 5th discovery. Truth leaves footprints.
Such a great concept.
It's such a powerful anchor when dealing with deepfakes or complex geopolitical lies. Powerful entities can manipulate digital narratives, they can synthesize audio, and they can craft beautiful conclusions. But they cannot easily alter physical reality across multiple domains.
Right, because a synthetic video might look visually flawless, but reality's footprint is the metadata. It's the physical fact that the person depicted was demonstrably in a different city, tracked by entirely independent flight records and credit card receipts.
You can't fake everything all at once.
Exactly. A false narrative can dominate the airwaves for a week, but reality eventually produces contradictions because it leaves physical traces, independent witnesses, and real-world consequences. Propaganda requires a vacuum. Reality leaves footprints everywhere.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Out of all these methods, the 6th discovery feels like the most radical shift for the modern mind. Like if you scroll through a feed today, you feel this immense unspoken social pressure to categorize every single headline as simply true or false.
You gotta have a hot take.
You must have a hot take. But the civilization of 3050 added 2 new, highly respected categories to their cognitive filing cabinets: unknown and insufficient evidence.
Adding those 2 categories literally saved them. They realized that many of their darkest historical periods occurred simply because populations rushed to a panicked certainty before the footprints of truth had enough time to actually form. Admitting, I don't have enough data to form a conclusion yet, was elevated from a sign of ignorance to the highest mark of intellectual maturity.
But, and I gotta ask this, if you're hearing this, you're probably sensing a trap. I know I did when I first read it.
Wow.
If we assume every single source is incomplete, if every institution has blind spots, and we're constantly just shrugging and saying insufficient evidence, doesn't that just breed a society of massive cynics? Like a paralyzed world where nobody trusts anyone or anything, and we all just retreat into our own isolated bubbles.
That is a very natural fear, and the chief engineer anticipates that exact fear in the 7th and 8th discoveries. The goal is not cynicism, because cynicism is actually just another form of lazy certainty.
Oh.
Well, it's the certainty that everything is a lie. That doesn't take work either. The future didn't abandon trust, they shifted how they trust. Instead of trusting charismatic personalities or legacy brand names, they placed their trust in a disciplined process of verification.
Ah, process over personality. I like that.
Take the seventh discovery,
Ah.
comparing independent sources. The text offers a brilliant, glaring warning about modern media. If 10 different news outlets all repeat the exact same story, quoting the exact same anonymous official from a single press release, you do not have 10 sources.
Right.
You have one source repeated 10 times.
And that illusion of consensus happens every single day. We see a headline everywhere and assume it's an established fact, but it's just an echo chamber of the same unverified beam of steel.
Which is why future analysts learn to ask, how many truly independent pathways lead to this conclusion? And they pair that with the eighth discovery. Watch actions over words.
Always good advice.
Always. Words can be endlessly spun, synthesized, and focus grouped. Actions require caloric energy and risk. If you want to know what an institution or a person truly believes, ignore the press release about their future intentions. Look at where they allocate their capital and how they behave when they think nobody is watching.
Okay, so we have this toolkit. We understand the biology working against us. But how do we institutionalize this? How do we build what the text calls a civilization that learns without having a panic attack every time we open our news app?
The transmission suggests it starts at the individual level, internalizing 4 fundamental questions. Whenever you encounter a sudden crisis, a viral outrage, or a wildly confident claim, you pause and ask yourself, 1. What do we actually know as observable fact?
Find the steel beam.
Find the beam. 2. What do we think we know based on assumption? 3. What missing context might change the entire picture? And 4, the most powerful of all, what specific evidence would prove me wrong?
That fourth question is the ultimate antidote to certainty, because it forces you to define the exact conditions of your own potential error before you even adopt a belief. And that feeds right into what the manuscript calls the 30-50 rule. The most trusted thinkers of the future followed one simple cognitive habit: increase confidence slowly, decrease confidence quickly when evidence changes.
And just consider the alternative. Consider how our egos actually operate today. We increase our confidence instantly because grabbing onto a conclusion feels empowering. It gives us that dopamine.
Yep.
And then, when conflicting footprints appear, we decrease our confidence agonizingly slowly, fighting it every step of the way or outright denying reality.
The text calls that narrative lock. It's when you become so emotionally tethered to a conclusion that destroying the conclusion feels like destroying yourself, which is why applying the 30-50 rule is so painful. We don't just hold beliefs in our error, we wrap our entire identities around them.
This raises an important question for all of us, explored in the chapter on separating identity from belief. Think about our current political and cultural climate. Why is changing your mind practically viewed as a moral failing today?
It really is.
Right. If a leader revises a stance based on new data, they are mocked as a flip-flopper. If you admit to your peer group that you are wrong about a highly charged topic, you risk being ostracized.
It all comes back to that tribal survival instinct. Like if I admit my skyscraper was built on a flawed conclusion, I feel like I'm betraying my tribe.
Exactly.
But the chief engineer says the civilizations that actually survived the Great Verification Crisis learned to detangle their self-worth from their specific beliefs. They valued the ongoing process of becoming correct over the momentary ego trip of winning an argument.
Because intellectual flexibility, the willingness to let a false belief die so that you don't have to die with it, was recognized as the ultimate evolutionary advantage. The civilizations that endured weren't the most heavily armed or the wealthiest. They were simply the ones who learned to value evidence above ego and relentless curiosity above the comfort of certainty.
So what does this all mean for you? The takeaway from this transmission from 3050 is that the storm is already here. Synthetic reality, algorithmic outrage, and information warfare, they're going to make the dashboard of your mind glitch constantly. The road signs are going to keep shifting.
And the ultimate anchor in that environment is a profoundly stoic realization from the chief engineer. Quote, reality does not require our agreement. It only requires our encounter with it.
Man, the universe doesn't care about our outrage, and it doesn't care about our assumptions. It's going to do what it's going to do. But I want to leave you with a final thought that takes this entire future survival manual and points it inward. We've spent this deep dive talking about questioning the information we consume from media, from governments, and from algorithms. But what about the stories we tell about ourselves?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. If our greatest historical vulnerability is acting on assumptions before verifying reality, what assumptions are you currently making about your own capabilities? What conclusions have you drawn about your own future or your own limitations that you are currently treating as unshakable facts?
Wow. We do that all the time.
We do. You might be suffering from narrative lock about your own life. Those personal limiting assumptions might completely fall apart if you just took a moment to ask for adversarial evidence against your own self-doubt. What footprints of your past successes are you ignoring just to maintain the comforting certainty of playing it safe?
That is a powerful way to look at it.
So the next time you feel the panic of uncertainty, whether it's scrolling through a chaotic news feed or facing a massive decision in your own life, don't just slam on the gas to make the anxiety stop. Check the instruments, look for the footprints. Remember that unknown is a perfectly valid destination. Keep asking, what if I'm wrong, and stay relentlessly curious. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.